Oh, sorry. I might obscure that.
Okay.
Oh, I have to.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, Scott.
Start?
Just two of us.
Oh, yeah, we can start, right?
Just two of us?
Just two
Yeah,
of us?
just do it.
Okay. Okay. I'm so glad having this interview with you right now.
Okay.
We're honored. We're from Indonesia. Indonesia is one of the most player in Call of Duty. Like everyone I know, like playing Call of Duty.
Yeah.
I myself, I play Call of Duty every single bit, like since Modern Warfare.
Yeah.
Like, but Modern Warfare is very
Yeah.
awesome.
It was awesome.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So, okay, so first question is, this is not the first time the Call of Duty using the World War II as the main theme, right? Yeah. So, what makes it different from the old Call of Duty games? Like features or gameplay mechanics or technology, story?
Well, I mean, technology is a given. You know, when you talk about the last time that we were in WW2, it was about 10 years ago, and that's just a lifetime in terms of technology. And so the things that you can accomplish now versus then, it's hard to underestimate. So I know for us, that had some ramifications. Is everything okay?
Oh,
Yeah, okay. When we knew that we had technology that would allow us, for instance, to deliver much more emotional, nuanced character performances, it led us down a path where we could tell a more nuanced, character-focused story. And so definitely in terms of looking at what we're doing now in 2017 versus what we did in the past, that's an area where I think we've been able to dig a little bit deeper.
Okay. So, is there any new mechanics introduced in this series?
Yeah, I mean, specifically in relation to the single-player campaign, which is more where my area of focus is, from a story and narrative perspective, there was a real strong emphasis on brotherhood, on the ways in which I rely upon my squad to get me through an experience. So in terms of mechanics, one of the things that we added to the game this year is we have this notion of squad abilities. You can almost think of it as sort of score streaks for the SP campaign, where essentially you are earning points, you're banking that, and it basically will unlock the ability to, in a tight spot, to call upon the other members of your squad for more ammo, a health kit, a special strike that would allow you to get through an encounter that otherwise might be too challenging to do on your own. And so that's sort of an instance in which it was really story dovetailing with the mechanics very closely to try and emphasize this theme of brotherhood and how I'm going to rely upon my squad to get through this experience.
Okay. So, is there any veteran or real soldier involved in the making of the
In terms of consultants that we worked with?
Yeah,
or
consultants or maybe like acting?
Well, I mean, you know, even within the staff of our studio, we have people that have served actively, and that's a enormous benefit to us because they can point out when we get things wrong. We can quickly fix them before too many people see them out in the public space. But then, in addition to that, we worked very closely with military historians that had a specific focus on this era, because there's so much in terms of the details, in terms of the language, the technology, the gear that we wanted to make sure and get right. So we worked with a guy, Marty Morgan, who has written extensively on the period, as a published author, historian, has devoted his life to this, and he was sort of an invaluable resource and guide for us through this process.
Okay. So the next question is I think it's quite well known that the following, that every new COD game refers to World War II as the main theme. There will be always requests as can I play as an Axis? Or
Sure.
There will be like the Axis perspective. Will the World War II fulfill this request, or we're only going to play as allies?
Well, I mean, clearly in the multiplayer mode, you're playing as both sides, because that's a competitive multiplayer experience. In terms of the single-player campaign, WW2 is such a big subject that we couldn't really feel like we could detail all aspects of it and do them justice. So we had to sort of narrow the focus. And so this time out, we really are playing primarily from the Allied perspective. You know, it's hard to say what the future would be. Maybe we would look at that in the future in terms of broadening that out. But even within that, we tried to have a much more nuanced take on the conflict to show that even within sort of the Germans that we were fighting against, it wasn't a situation where all of them were Nazis. Some of them were just good Germans that were caught up within this larger conflict. And definitely that's something that you see in some of the interactions and the moments that you experience in the story.
Okay, so regarding to the multiplayer,
yep.
I really love the war mode.
Sure, yeah.
I really love the war mode. So, any idea how to expand this, like maybe in the future, or any like real war scenario you try to adapt?
Well, I mean, it's great to hear that you love it, and from everything I've heard, people in the beta broadly are really enjoying it. And so typically, if a lot of people are enjoying something, that's a good recipe for getting more of it. So I know that we already have plans to deliver more of that in future expansions, and to the extent that there's appetite and enthusiasm for it in the fan base, I can only imagine there'll be more of it. You know, one of the great things about the war mode, and you kind of mentioned this, is that especially for people that are fans of the era, that are knowledgeable about World War II, it's an opportunity to use that as a way of exploring famous battles or famous moments in the progress of the war. So it's not just this fictional thing that you're going through. It feels like it actually pulls from some of the texture and detail from real events. So,
yeah, that's pretty relieving. So, like, the war mode is very...
Yeah. A lot of people are enjoying it.
Okay, so this is kind of a like difficult question.
Okay.
For me.
Okay.
The reason the switch from the futuristic warfare to the past historical warfare will certainly, you will be compared to some certain game that also having this is also so.
Yeah.
Are you guys like what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, I think our thoughts about it are we are avid game players. We draw inspiration from all the games that are out there. We draw inspiration. We also feel the pressure to live up and be the best thing that we can possibly be. So it's never really a situation of us feeling like we're necessarily in direct competition. If anything, we're inspired by the things that we're exposed to, whether it be games or films, and just try and raise our game as a result.
Okay. Speaking about films.
Yeah.
Speaking about films.
Sure.
What's your inspiration from this World War II?
Oh gosh, I mean that's a hard one to answer. I mean, there's a lot of, there's all the obvious examples. There's Saving Private Ryan. There's Band of Brothers. But we really tried to, kind of building on the question that you asked earlier, to show a wider range of perspectives. We also looked at films that explored that. So, for instance, we looked at films that were more from the German perspective. We looked at films that were even from the perspective of groups that you may not heard of. There was a really great film, if you ever have a chance, Kanal, that focuses on sort of the Warsaw Uprising. Fantastic film. Not something that we focus in this story, but there were just little details in the texture of that, the way that they handled it, that broadened our perspective and only made a better game as a result.
If you should recommend one film to the World War II fans.
I mean, honestly, if I was going to do it, it wouldn't even be a fiction film. It would be a documentary series. There's a fantastic British series called World at War that came out. It's 26 or 27 parts, so it's a commitment. But when we first started making the project, the first thing I did was just sort of watch that end to end. And one of the great things about that series is it was made, gosh, I want to say maybe 15, 20 years after the war had ended. So a lot of the people that were actually involved with it at the time were still alive. They were able to speak on camera, to share their experiences. So you had the really unusual experience of having people that had formerly fought on the Nazi side on camera, speaking about their experiences, giving their perspective. It was really eye-opening and really enriching to look at that.
Okay. Back in the presentation earlier,
yeah.
I saw the zombie mode.
Yes.
And it was so good.
Yeah.
Like, zombies are realistic. But,
sure.
It's like, what's your idea behind it? Is there any thought process within this new zombie mode?
Well, I mean, certainly it's a team that has worked in the horror genre before. It's a lot of people that had worked on Dead Space in the past. Myself, I worked on Dead Space, the first one, and partially through the second one. So we have a lot of passion for that genre. And I think for us, it was an opportunity to come in and maybe dig a little bit deeper in terms of a fictional story that was not completely fantastic, but actually drew inspiration from real history, real events, real mythology and lore. And I think you feel that in the experience. It doesn't feel quite as made up as maybe some of the previous modes. But then also, you know, we're just connoisseurs of the genre and tried to bring as much inspiration from sources from the East, from the West, different genres of horror films that we've all been inspired by, all the crazy stuff that Glenn has made me watch over the years.
So any new mechanics to the zombie mode?
In terms of the zombies mode, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't work as much on that, so I don't know that I can authoritatively speak to that. I know that absolutely, like all of our modes, it is a blend of bringing over certain features that you're used to from the previous experience, but finding new twists and innovations on that. I'm sure Tegan could get you more details if you needed that.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I think this is gonna be like in a long shot.
Okay.
What's your future project after the mobile?
Oh, well, come on, that's that's a long shot. We've spent the last 3 years really pouring our heart and souls into this, and it's been an enormous amount of work. And I think we're going to catch our breath after this is done. Hopefully, I hope to take a couple of days off, and then maybe think about it long and hard. But no, nothing really to say about what the future holds.
Okay, so most of the questions were asked already, so I'm just going to ask a few questions.
Okay.
So some of your best-selling games came from the Modern Warfare franchise, right? And that focuses more on the modern, present time.
Yep.
So I'm just curious on the thought process. What made you decide to do a 180 and go back to your roots?
You know, like any decision, there were a lot of factors that were involved in it, but it was actually interesting. I mean, when we talked to the fan base and we talked about what they were most passionate about seeing it, the thing that they actually came back with was World War II. That there was obviously a lot of enthusiasm for modern. I mean, that's been a great run for the franchise. But honestly, when you actually looked at the numbers, there was even more passion for a return, especially after this amount of time that's passed. It really felt like there was an opportunity with the new hardware to really represent a completely fresh take on it.
All right, one more. Can you elaborate deeper on the research process on how did you get the historical aspect of it? Did you interview real or like veterans?
You know, and once again, I mentioned him previously, Marty Morgan, the historian that I worked with. He, for years, worked at the National WWII Museum in New Orleans in the U.S. And one of the great things about that, in terms of working there and in terms of the writings and the books that he's written, he has an extensive network of veterans that he has connections with. So it was a combination of through him getting their stories and their experiences, but then also when we would go to visit him and we would go to the museum, he would, you know, introduce us to some of those. We even did sort of tours of the European front, basically some of the same locations. Yeah, because one of the things he does in addition to his writings is that he does extensive tours of those sites. So he was literally able to take us to these same locations and show us, like, here is the foxhole where they were in at this one point, and show us the bullet hole in the wall, and really take what could just be dry history and make it come alive.
It's like a full immersion.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really opens your eyes to it.
That's good. Actually, that's